Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, BERDON LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, MUSS Development LLC, NEWMARK Knight Frank, PALIN Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller, host of the Stoller Report, Real Estate Trends in the Tri-State Region. New York City development, retail, everything is hot. But one area that we're seeing a great deal of development is north of 96th Street, and especially in what we would call the three different Harlems. Today I have three guests who really know what's going on, who are developing, responsible for new projects, existing projects in Harlem and north of 96th Street. My guests include Derek Johnson, president of Integrated Holdings, Jim Simmons, partner at Apollo Real Estate Advisors, and last but not least, David Blumenfeld, principal at Blumenfeld Development. So what's going on in Harlem, guys? The two of you live there. You've been working there for so many years, so what's going on in Harlem, Mr. Johnson?
Things are, as you said, things are robust. As you know, the market is replete with residential development, particularly for sale condominiums. There's a good deal of affordable housing being built now, and we're quite proud to be bringing some commercial development to the principal corridor, 125th Street, with an office building in development, and we expect to be starting construction soon. So
you're
we're
going
excited.
to see. It's interesting because you and David are bringing two major, different type of developments which we haven't seen in Harlem or north of 96th Street ever. I mean, David is completely different. You're building on. Why don't you tell my guests?
Yeah. We're building to about 600,000 square feet, 500,000 of which is office, Class A office, 100,000 retail. We are finding no shortage of retail tenants who are willing to pay escalating price points to be part of the project.
Is that a little evasive, escalating? He'll tell us how much he's getting in East River Plaza.
Well, I'll let him
and
tell
he'll
you
tell
about
me what he's going to plan to get on 125th Street in his retail.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to do it this way. There are cases on 125th Street level retail approximating $175 a square foot.
Derek,
that may not be.
I don't want to say, there are three distinct Harlems. And you're in East Harlem. And David's building East River Plaza, which is in East Harlem. And Jim has a project which is in Central Harlem on a retail site.
Right.
And West Harlem is the best Harlem for retail because of what's around there and what's been going on.
Well, let me say this. We're going to put that theory to the test.
Okay.
We're right there at a major transportation hub. We've got both the Metro North, the 4 and the 5, and ultimately the 2nd Avenue subway that starts at our project. So we're very bullish about both the retail and the office potential. We've got 4 or 5 major commercial, credit-worthy office tenants vying competitively to be our anchor, and we're excited. It's a good time for us.
Prior to the show, David said you probably have a city agency or a nonprofit going in there. Why'd you say that?
Well, what we've found in the office market in Harlem, and we own a building on 125th Street, and we've looked at doing other deals. At one time when East River Plaza was having its trouble before construction started, we looked at doing some office space there. And the tenants we found out in the market were mostly non-for-profit or city agencies. We're doing a small project on Park Avenue and 122nd Street. Again, there we have a retail tenant that's got a manufacturing component to it, and then we have a city agency looking at the balance of the building. So that's what we found, our experience there.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the East River Plaza.
East River Plaza, it's becoming...
Culmination of a couple of years?
It's 14 years in the making. It was a great idea.
So last year was its bar mitzvah?
Last year was its bar mitzvah.
Perseverance, that's what it is.
It was a great idea when we came up with it originally. Thank God the idea has outlasted, you know.
And it's even got better.
It's gotten better. It's a 4-story big box retail center. It doesn't exist really in the country anywhere in this form. There are hints of it around the country in smaller forms.
What do you mean it doesn't exist in the country in this form?
Well, in the country, typically big box retail is urban and spread out, and even in certain cities, I mean, maybe there'll be 2 tenants on top of one another, but to stack 4 stories of big box retail and have only big box tenants is an unusual thing.
So you're going to have this 135,000 square foot Home Depot?
There's something called the FDR level, which is actually on grade with the FDR, which is a 30,000 square foot box, which is unfilled yet today. Then what we call the grade level, which is on grade with 116th Street, because of the elevation change there, is a 120,000 foot Home Depot.
And then?
And then above that is a Target for a 160,000 foot Target. Above that on the 3rd floor is Best Buy is signed on for a portion of the floor. And then above that we have, on the 4th floor, we have a signed LOI with Marshalls for a portion of the floor. So there's a few spaces we have to fill in.
Now what's interesting is Marshalls is in Harlem right now, aren't they?
Marshalls is on West 125th Street.
Right.
That's correct.
Yes.
So they
clearly distinguish the 2 markets,
right.
West Harlem, East Harlem. And I think in our case, I don't know that we're Harlem only. I think we are Harlem, and then we are Upper Manhattan.
Well, wait a second. As far as I know, Upper Manhattan, and Jim, you own a lot of property in Upper Manhattan, is different than where you're saying. 116th Street and the East River to me is Harlem. This is not Upper Manhattan.
Well,
am I right or wrong?
Yes, technically you're right. North of 96th Street on the east side, north of 110th Street on the west side has been the traditional boundaries for Harlem all the way up to 155th Street. But I think that David's point is that they view their ability to pull from all of Upper Manhattan, which from a big box perspective is severely under-retailed. So I think that's what he's saying.
I think in certain aspects, I think they're going to pull from all of Manhattan because, you know, certain people can go, there are 3 or 4 Home Depots in Manhattan right now. But all of them, you have no access by your car. So a person, it's like Fairway. You know, you can go to different Fairways, but you can't go to the Fairway parking lot on 127th Street. People go there. And I think the opportunity of having a car and to go to Fairway and to go to Best Buy, and I think that's why they're going into this situation. You know, it's a different type of operation.
That was my point. I think, you know, we will service the community of East Harlem. There's no doubt. But I think we will also service the Upper East Side. We could service Battery Park because it's just a ride up the FDR Drive by taxi or by car. There's also access by public transportation, by the train, the subway, the 5 and the 6 to 116th Street, and then the bus over to the site. The bus will actually come through the site and stop on site. So I don't know how many people are going to go to Home Depot and buy 2x4s and take them back on the bus, but I think some of the other tenants, and having that open air, big box retail center where they're all together is a very different experience than you can go anywhere in Manhattan right now.
Right, and then you said prior to my show, which is interesting, that because of the rezoning that we were talking about in Harlem, that one day you may even build apartments on top of the towers.
We did not max out the FAR on the site. We're building the project under a special permit. So we've put in infrastructure to add FAR some point down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, whatever the markets perceive it to be. We'd actually have to go through the approval process again. So we've just left the flexibility in the project for that to occur. We have no plans today to build anything.
Right, but the interesting thing is, you know, being on the FDR, I mean, these apartments, because of the gentrification of what you've seen in Harlem and everything else, this is water view. I mean, this could be a magnificent apartments facing, you know, right on the water over there. With at that time, as Derek was saying, the the 2nd Avenue subway, which will be closer because it'll be a block and a half away, as
Correct.
opposed to being now 4 blocks away on the Lexington Avenue line. Now, you are the 800-pound gorilla, even though not figuratively. Okay, how many apartments you own in Harlem and north of 96th Street?
Probably just south of 6,000 units.
6,000 units. And who's living in these 6,000 units?
Average New Yorkers. And, you know, our mantra is creating workforce housing. And what we're doing is we're taking underutilized, underinvested properties, making them livable, providing professional management, providing professional services for your working class, ordinary New York citizen.
Right, you know, but let's talk about specifically, because what you've done, you know, which is now called Savoy, used to be called Delano Village, which is how many units?
1,800.
What you do over there? I mean, you took a place that looked like a project, I hate to say, and you've made it more of a really good community residential rental.
Well, I'll let you describe what it looked like prior to. I can say
it's like the apple. It wasn't shine.
I can say that what we have done with our operating partners is to create a more livable environment. So we dramatically increase the security by installing cameras. We've landscaped. We've upgraded corridors and elevators, all of which provides a higher standard of living for the residents there. And at the same time, at the very same time, keeping the rents for those individuals low and at the standard that they were before, such that we are not going in and creating a situation where people can't afford to live where they have lived for 10, 15, or 20 years.
You know, we were talking prior to the show, the site that you're doing on 125th Street, which was once also called Harlem Park, and David had asked you, is, are you building residential over there? And then I wanted to really get into your discussion of your site on 126th Street. Why didn't you do residential?
Yeah. We looked at residential.
I mean,
Frankly,
I also have to say that you do have other partners. You have Warnado and McFarland. We have to.
We looked at residential, and frankly, we looked at residential just like everyone else looking at that site looked at residential. But I think our conclusion was really twofold. Number one, this is our view, may not be the universal, but I think our sense was that the residential market in Harlem is reaching its apex at the moment. One, and two, there is a, whether it is or it isn't, there is a clear lack of first class or Class A office space. In fact, as you know, this will be the first new Class A office building in Harlem in almost 40 years.
And the first one ever built in East Harlem.
The first one ever built in East Harlem.
No, I mean,
We built one, small one, not that big.
I know,
Right,
okay.
right.
3 stories is different than 60 stories. I realize, you know.
And Forest City built one.
Right, but that was more of a
West Harlem.
West
West
Harlem.
Harlem.
Yeah.
Or central, actually.
So we also thought, obviously, with the Metro North right next to the site, that pushing residential units at that location would be adversely affected by the experience. So we're quite, as I said before, we're quite bullish about office. We think, frankly, the growth of the residential market, in fact, buttresses our case and buttresses the potential of this development. Conversely, we also think that the development is good for the residential market because we're bringing what we believe to be quality jobs to a community where they are at a dearth at the moment. So it's exciting. We are clearly trailblazers in the sense that we are committed to commercial as opposed to residential. But we think there are other capable people out there, two of whom are with me, attending to the residential market, and we'll stick to what we know best.
Let's get off the residential. I think Jim has given us a good idea on the residential, and David, one day on 126th Street on your site, where you really were a trailblazer going on 125th Street 6 years ago, 5 years ago?
A little bit longer than that. No.
Okay. Building the 3-story with retail on the bottom and the motor vehicle and the nonprofit over there. From what I hear, there are at least 2 hotels and possibly 3 hotels planned for Harlem. 2 I know definitely are taking place. There hasn't been a new hotel in Harlem in probably longer than all 3 of us who were born. Do you think Harlem can absorb 2, 3, or 4 new hotels? Jim?
Well, I think where you have 0, certainly the demand is greater than 0. I would presume that those who are doing the hotels are going after different market segments, as they would in any other part of the city.
Ironically, the 2 that I've spoken to are really going after the same segment.
Which segment?
The higher end. One is going to be the Starwood Aloft, not a W, and the other one they really want to create their own non-branded hotel boutique.
I mean, I would think that I think there's a market for a hotel in Harlem. I'm not sure high end is the way that I would look at the market in Harlem for a hotel. A very stable business environment type of hotel would probably be very successful in Harlem. Something affordable, but not something cheap either. A Marriott Renaissance or something like that would be a very suitable hotel for Harlem. And a lot of it is a function of where the hotel would be located.
Right. I mean, there's one right now on 125th Street and 5th Avenue, which is in planning stages, which is going to happen, where I had met with them and I said, are you putting condos on it? No, they're just making it a hotel with limited retail because they didn't buy the corner, so they're over there. Then there is, I think, on 123rd and Frederick Douglass Boulevard?
124th.
124th Street. The Lamb Group and some other people are building this aloft. They're not certain it's in a loft. As late of yesterday, I just heard
I guess I would look at the people that know better than most. In their case, you have Vornado as their partner. They bought a site that was zoned for a hotel. If it's that good, why isn't Vornado building a hotel?
Yeah.
Okay, you own a piece of retail. You own retail on 125th Street. Why don't you build a hotel over there?
Well, if I felt it was the appropriate location, I would. I think that it's very location specific, as David said. Clearly, the primary hub of activity happens to be more west than east, probably between 7th and 8th Avenues, where you have cultural icons like the Apollo Theater. We were of the belief that that area between the A, C, B, and D trains and the 2 and the 3 trains was where you wanted to be for a hotel. We believed that an upscale brand did work, but on a relatively limited scale, somewhere between 120 and 160 rooms, at least to start, and with condos to go with it. So, a W brand, which was something that we had envisioned, would bring a new clientele to 125th Street and augment, not supplant, but augment the cultural icons that are there, like the Studio Museum and like the Apollo. I think what's really interesting, of this whole conversation is the fact that a team like theirs believe that they can attract a credit tenant for 500,000 square feet. When I was at the empowerment zone, and this was post 9/11, where one would think it would be the opportune time to attract companies that were looking for homes for their employees, as opposed to looking in Westchester or in Jersey City or Hoboken, we could not convince any major credit tenants to locate on 125th Street, even though we had a building that we could basically move them into immediately. So fast forward 7 years later, and to have a firm to believe that they can place that amount of space with a credit tenant, I think is amazing. So,
I believe that they are going to be able to rent it, especially when you have a vacancy factor in the city at low as 6%, and your average rent in Midtown for a B building is $87. Now, if you're an A building, you're at $100. So you're going to be at a 50% discount.
That's right.
One stop away. I think.
Well, you're answering the question.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Right.
I mean, and that's why I don't believe that the delta between Midtown for an office building and where they're going to build their office building is a lot greater than the delta between a Upper East Side B residential building, new, even though it's new, but nothing spectacular, to a new residential building in Harlem. The price differential isn't that great anymore. At one point, it was.
So basically, what you're saying, okay, on the office, it's one. It's the question of certain people are believing their own hype in the residential north of 96th Street. They think that, and I concur with Derek, and I think Jim's opinion, I don't want to say it, is that some people think you should pay $800 to $1,000 to be north of 96th Street, and I don't think it's really going to happen.
I think
that you could achieve. The question is
$1,000 a square foot?
A little bit less. The question is when you start going over that, what's the point? I could still buy $1,200 a foot in the center of the city somewhere.
Right. It's more convenience, more amenities, and other situations.
What's allowed the residential to occur and what's allowing now the office to occur is the fact that the services on 125th Street have come.
Right.
So 7 years ago when he was at the empowerment zone, and Jim and I worked together to try to find, we couldn't even get BET to take office space in Harlem. I mean, that's how bad it was. And the reason was there were no services,
right,
but now the services are there.
But I think you agree. I mean, before Harlem USA and before your own development, I mean, you went down 125th Street, you had mom and pops.
Yep.
You had braiding stores, you had a variety of situations. You have those braiding stores right now in East Harlem, okay? I mean, the neighborhood, and I think part of what you and I have discussed this, in your building, you have to also build some restaurants and other things to service your own, the office tenants and also the community.
Absolutely.
They can't run to the local, Burger King, the Popeyes. They can't absorb the people.
Right.
I mean, it's limited. If you're going to bring that amount of people, you're going to have to do that.
Right.
There's when you were in the empowerment zone, I assume that you were involved with the auto mall.
that's correct.
Okay, how's the auto mall doing? People don't realize that this is the largest auto mall in any major urban city.
Well, I actually can't speak for how it's doing. I
What do you
drive by
think?
and I see people shopping, and it seems that it's doing well. Listen, when we looked at that transaction, when you look at the Empowerment Zone's mission, it was to create jobs. And what we did was took underutilized land and brought it back online such that it was paying taxes and employing individuals. And not only employing them with jobs, but with careers. So one of the things we spent a lot of time with GM was defining how a person can come in and start basically cleaning cars and work their way up to being general manager, such that there was a real direct path to that. That's what the Empowerment Zone was about, and that's sort of what we've all bought into, is the improvement of all of Upper Manhattan by crime reduction, schools improving, by cleaner streets, all the things that have come together over the last 10 years to really make it viable for any of us to do what we're doing.
Right. You know, we were talking about, okay, David, you were involved. I mean, Jim was the chief investment officer at the Empowerment Zone.
You were an interim president for one point, too.
Right, interim president. You were involved with the Apollo Theater and so on. But let's fast forward today, okay? We have retail. We have a large amount of residential, which never existed. Probably more residential has been built in Harlem, north of 96th than any other section in the city if you take. Okay, now we have another site that's being built, that's being bid, that you're bidding on. What is that going to be? This is a site on 125th to 127th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, right near the Auto Mall.
Right. Right.
What's going to be built there?
Well, we did plans and we backed out.
Okay, what were you planning to do?
Well, I bid on it 15 years ago, I want to say, the first time, maybe 12 years ago.
Okay, let's go to the bar mitzvah
before
time.
my time.
Okay, what were you bidding now? Because we got 2 minutes left, and then I want to hear what he's.
We were looking to do something more low-rise. We were looking not to max out the FAR of the site. The city is looking to max out the FAR of the site.
For my audience, FAR means the floor height.
Floor area ratio.
Right.
How much footage you could put on the site.
But what were you planning to do there?
We were planning on either putting a hostel club there.
Like a BJ's or a Costco?
We had BJ's as a partner on our bid. When we never submitted our bid, but our plan was to submit it with BJ's. And then do some residential component, but not to the magnitude of the
And what are you planning to
proposal
do over
that
there?
Well, EDC called for, in their RFP, the development of a 1.7 million square foot project. That's what we have drawn. We think it's exciting. It's
1.7 million is a lot of square footage.
A lot of
development.
We've proposed, obviously no one has been awarded, but we've proposed 831 units of affordable housing. We've proposed a mix of big box, specialty, and local retail, lots of which will be exclusively catered to the immediate community. We're very excited. We've got clearly the largest Latin media company emerging as a anchor tenant for the office space. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. So what I hear is, even though there's a credit crunch, even though the economy's slowing down in certain aspects, there's a lot going on north of 96th Street. And I think all three of you are actively involved in different aspects. You in this mixed project, you in East River Plaza, plus what's going on. Jim with the 6,000 units of residential, coupled with the other retail that you're going to do eventually on 125th Street. And as they would say, Harlem is hot. I think I'm very happy that I've had three guys who really know what's going on. I'd like to thank Derek Johnson, Jim Simmons, and David Blumenfeld. Next week, we're going to have some guys who really know residential. They live, eat, and they're going to tell us what's happening in the residential market in New York City. See you next week. Thank you.
See you next week.
Major funding for this program is provided by grants from HSH Nordbank and First American Title Insurance Company of New York, Perfect Building Maintenance, Allied Partners, Murray Hill Properties, Bank of America, SJP Properties, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding for this program is made possible by grants from Arbor Realty Trust, BRT Realty Trust, BERDON LLP, CB Richard Ellis, City Habitats, City Investment Fund, Cushman & Wakefield, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, McSam Hotel Group, MUSS Development LLC, Newmark Knight Frank, PALIN Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal Inc., Signature Bank, Sidney Fettner Associates, Studley, Stonehenge Partners, Swig Equities, Extreme Contracting and Deconstruction.